Very helpful. And again, I think it's very nice that you brought in a poster child. I really think more people should do it. Is there anyone else who would like to speak before we make a decision on this?
Wait a minute, you don't want to have everyone speak?
No, we just one at a time. Could we first hear from somebody from the Democratic Town Committee? Is there someone available?
I can speak on behalf.
I will hear from you.
Thank you everyone for being here. Campuses, the town clerk, interested members of the public. First, I want to make clear the objection to Mr. Sheldon's candidacy was brought forward by the Foster Democratic Town Committee. When you read the letter, you indicated Mrs. Ryder's name.
Well, she's the secretary.
She's not the one who made the complaint. It's the committee that made the complaint. She is the corresponding secretary of the committee, responsible for crafting correspondence and sending it out. That's why her name is there. I was asked to attend today and say a few words if necessary. Again, I'm not the one bringing the complaint. It's on behalf of the committee. I just happen to be the one who was available to appear. First of all, the committee would like to commend Mr. Sheldon for his desire for civic engagement. It's a great challenge and a great responsibility to be a candidate, even more so to be a public official if one is elected. So we commend him on his intent to declare his candidacy. The only problem is that he declared in the wrong town. He declared in the wrong state. This is a simple case. Where does Mr. Sheldon live? You've been provided with a map obtained from the town of Killingly. The map clearly shows Mr. Sheldon's residence here at number 9. It clearly shows a vertical dashed line that indicates the state line. Foster is to the right, Killingly is to the left. Mr. Sheldon, the entirety of his house exists within the town of Killingly, Connecticut. It's not in Foster, it's not in Rhode Island. This is not disputed. He does not live here. Now, if you look further down, actually on the same map, you can see that at the bottom of the map there is a lot indicated number 7. Lot number 7, very much the same as Mr. Sheldon's. A portion of it is in Connecticut, a portion of it is in Foster. But in lot number 7, the entirety of the house is in Connecticut. That person certainly would be lot number 7. The entirety of the house is in Rhode Island. Whoever is a resident on lot number 7, even though they own property in Connecticut, resides in Rhode Island. Mr. Sheldon is the opposite. He owns land in Rhode Island. He resides in Connecticut, undisputed, indisputed himself. I know he lives in Connecticut. You know he lives in Connecticut. The town of Killingly knows he lives in Connecticut. This is their record. Even Mr. Sheldon knows he lives in Connecticut. Otherwise, why would he register his vehicles in the state of Connecticut? It doesn't make sense to the average person that if I'm a resident of Rhode Island, I'm going to register my vehicles in Connecticut. You have in front of you the property record card of the town of Killingly that lists mailing address, 127 Cucumber Hill Road, Foster, Rhode Island. Site of the house, location of the house, 31 Cucumber Hill Road, Killingly, Connecticut. The house lies in Connecticut. He resides in Connecticut. Now he does have a mailing address, a Foster mailing address. We don't dispute. His mailbox stands in the town of Foster. We don't dispute that. But that's due to the ease of postal delivery. That has to do with the postal routes. Your mail is delivered by the postal post office. But Pontiac High School is not located in Old Situate. That's its mailing address. It's located in Boston. It's very clear the difference between a mailing address and an address where you reside. That's very clear. I refer you also to Title 17, Rhode Island Elections Law. The determinant of one's domicile is the person's factual physical presence in the voting district on a regular basis, incorporating an intention to reside for an indefinite period. opposite. He resides in the state of Connecticut. It's clear. It's undisputed. Further down on the same page, prima facie evidence for determining person's residence for voting purposes. The address from which the voter's motor vehicle is registered. The motor vehicle is registered in Killingly, Connecticut, with a mailing address of 127 Cucumber Hill Road, Foster, Rhode Island, because that's the only way the post office delivers in Connecticut. The post office doesn't decide where you live. The state line decides where you live. It's going to live. Have documentation in front of you from the town of Killingly, again from the tax record book, showing that there are two vehicles, a Dodge Durango and a Dodge Dakota, both of which are registered in Killingly, in the town of Connecticut. Mailing address is Foster, but people at Foster don't register their vehicles. Doesn't make sense. You have his registrations as well, prima facie evidence. He has not presented today to this board, to this room, any evidence that disputes the prima facie evidence called for in Title 17 that the location of the registration of the vehicles establishes residence. Now he's provided you with other pieces of evidence that say he's a Rhode Island resident, he's a Connecticut resident, he's both, he's one, he's the other. He has not been able to dispute prima facie evidence that vehicles are registered in Connecticut. That's what Title 17 calls for. Let's say for a minute that I want to be known as a dog. I've decided a dog. I can model and I can quack. I can dye my hair white to look like feathers. I can become a card-carrying man or a member of Ducks Unlimited. In fact, I can probably even in an election year get my congressman to introduce legislation to say on the U.S. Census, if I want to be counted as a duck, I'm a duck. But that's irrelevant. But there is a clear line between what a human is and what a duck is. It doesn't matter what I hold myself out as and say, I want to be a duck, that doesn't matter. There is a clear line differentiating those things. There is also a clear line differentiating people who live in Rhode Island and people who live in Connecticut. Whatever law, whatever ruling may be passed to obfuscate and obscure that line doesn't make any sense. The line is the line. You can say what you want, but the line is the line. I'll never be a duck. Rhode Island Board of Elections does, in their ruling, use the word address. What address? And I've already basically addressed the word address as being a postal address, a mailing address. That's really not valid in rural routes where the rural post office delivering mail for establishing residence. The state line has to be the government, the post office. But the little bit of ambiguity in this particular ruling does make some sense. I mean, if it were entirely clear that we no need for lawyers, there'd be no need for judges, there'd be no need for adjudicating panels like this or a panel of the Board of Elections. These things exist so that we can interpret the law. What does the law mean? What does the ruling or the regulation mean? So the state line does that. Oh, so very clearly. The idiosyncrasies of the postal rule have no bearing. So this wiggle room does have a little bit of merit. It has a merit in the case of a college student. A college student who is a resident of Rhode Island but actually spends 10 months a year at a college in Tennessee or California. They're still a resident of Rhode Island. They're just living there. A military personnel who may be serving in Iraq or Afghanistan. They're from Rhode Island, but they haven't been here for 2.5 years. But this is their residence. Their family is still in Rhode Island. They're just serving overseas. In the case of retirees that maybe spend half of the year down in Florida to avoid the weather and half of the year back here, all of those people maintain their residence in the state of Rhode Island, they can do so under the legal of this particular word. And that's valid. What's different between all of those groups of people and Mr. Sheldon is that those groups of people have a residence in Rhode Island that they will return to. Their permanent residence exists within the borders of the state of Rhode Island. And maybe they're outside of the state for a little while, but it's a temporary thing. And with Mr. Sheldon, he's established a permanent home. He's not coming back to Rhode Island. He's not going back and forth because of college, because of he's been sent overseas. He has established a permanent residence in the state. All those other people are transient. And that's a key point. Now, perhaps he didn't realize, he says he didn't realize it. I don't want to impugn him at all. This is purely a case of here versus there. I don't doubt his intentions are perhaps the best, but the state line is the state line. It's permanent residence. It's not a Rhode Island. He's left the state with permanent. So if the ruling were to be interpreted to allow those who live in other states to run for office in Rhode Island, would that not be an injustice? Does that make any sense at all? It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense at all. And we, in the United States, and in Rhode Island in particular, have a long history of opposing injustice. I don't think that this ruling should be interpreted to allow his residency to be in Rhode Island. It wasn't written that way. It wasn't, I don't believe it was intended that way. And if it was, for some obscure reason, then it's clearly an injustice, and we don't stand for those. We don't stand and say, let's just allow that to happen. I mean, you think about the entire American Revolution was based upon injustices. They put a tax on tea in 1775, and Samuel Adams and his group didn't pay the tax. They dumped the tea in the harbor. Everyone's familiar with the Tea Party. We're all familiar with the Tea Party. In Rhode Island here, we burnt the Gaspee. We burnt the Gaspee as opposed to paying the tax. Now, what do we call those people that stand up against unjust rules, unjust application of law? We call those people, we call them heroes. That's what we call them. I mean, Theodore Foster, after whom this town was named, was involved in the burning of the Gaspee, involved in standing up against an unjust interpretation or unjust regulation. He burned the Gaspee. What did we do? We made him first senator of the state of Rhode Island. We named the town after him. That's what we do. When it's just, it's just. When it's not, it's not. When it's a state line, you're on the left, you're on the right. It happens everywhere. I can go on and on. Rosa Parks sat on the front of the bus. Rules say she couldn't do that, but she did. We think about the man who stood in front of the tank at Tiananmen Square. He said, you know, this rule is not just. Might have been put forward by the government, but he's going to face off against that tank, alone, if he needs to, at great peril to himself, or herself, if they need to. The application cannot be unjust. The state line is clear. So, the Democratic Town Committee would ask that you find that this wiggle room, this ambiguity, as far as residents in this statute, does not apply to Mr. Sheldon. He is a permanent resident of the state of Connecticut with prima facie evidence per statute to determine that. He does not qualify for placement on the ballot. We ask that you stand up for what is right. Sustain the Democratic Town Committee's objection and rule that he does not qualify for placement on the ballot. Respect that from us. Thank you.
Madam Chair.
One person may speak to Mr. Sheldon and
Okay.
I don't hand up for you.
Okay, sorry.
Heidi Rogers, Cucumber Hill Road. all of the facts that Mr. Lewis just brought out were obviously presented in the Superior Court, and it was a favorable decision for Mr. Sheldon. I think it's pretty clear. There's no ambiguity, no wiggle room. If you read Section 1302 of the Charter, qualifications, clearly states, all elected officials shall be qualified electors of the town. So my question to you is, does Mr. Sheldon's name appear on your voter list? Has he been allowed to vote in the town of Foster?
Yeah.
Then your decision's pretty easy. That's all I have to say.